We're continuing the Azure SQL Security series with a special episode on auditing. Learn about all the options for Azure SQL this week on Data Exposed. Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed. Today, I have Sravani joining us from the Azure SQL Security team. Thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much. I'm Sravani, working as a senior program manager with the database platform security team. So our entire team works into the security pillar, and I'm program manager for auditing feature for Azure database, managed instance, and even on-prem servers. So along with that, I also own a couple of more features in security related to Windows authentication for SQL MI and with Azure AD Kerberos principles. So I have been working with SQL Server close to 14 years now and working with Microsoft customers close to 10 years.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of experience. That's a lot of very important security features. So it's exciting to have you on the show. Today we're going to be continuing our series of Azure SQL Security. We took a little break from it, but we're back, and we're going to be talking about auditing today. It sounds like you're the perfect person to talk to about that. But before we get to that, for folks who might not have followed along the series, can you tell us a little bit about where we're at in the Azure SQL Security series?
Absolutely. So in the security series, we covered most the top topics related to authentication and access management. We spoke about data protection, which covered the encryption, data masking, TD, and then we spoke about the network security, including private link and the network layers. Then now we are going to talk about auditing and followed by threat prevention and detection.
Okay, cool. So let's get right into it. What is auditing and why is it important?
Okay, so since we are into the database world, auditing is one of the most important feature as it helps you to track all the database events like any kind of DML operations, DDL changes, schema changes, failed login. So anything that happens for your database, you can track them using this auditing feature. So this is a very critical and important feature for any database systems. And why does it exist is basically to help our customers to achieve security and compliance for their applications, right? So this provides you a transparency about what is happening inside the database, and the logs can be used to investigate any security incidents, generate the reports about the database activities. It also helps you to analyze the reports to find trends, any kind of suspicious events, and unusual activities. So, auditing as a feature itself is very important for any kind of database systems. When come to the support, we support auditing for various flavors of SQL Server. So, like our traditional customers know, we have auditing for on-prem, starting SQL Server 2008 and till the latest version, and we also support auditing for the Azure SQL database, SQL managed instance, hyperscale, Azure Synapse Analytics, and Synapse Workspaces. So these are the all SQL flavors we cover, and auditing feature exists in each and every SQL flavor that we have today. So what type of audits we do is basically there are customer facing audits, which are basically the server level and database level audits, which can be used to track the actions, the events that are occurring inside your SQL Server, Azure database, or even the managed instance. We also have a database level audit, which can help you to track the events at the database level. So we offer various set of action groups that can be configured based on your security requirements, compliance requirements, or the any tracking purpose. We offer a lot of flavors of action groups that covers all kind of actions that you perform against the database. And we also, for Azure SQL database, we also have a special auditing, that is DevOps audit, which can be enabled. That helps you to track the Microsoft support operations, since it's managed by Microsoft. If there are any operations that are done from the Microsoft technical support team, that can be even tracked using this DevOps audit. So these are the different types of audits that we have today. And we also support a lot of various targets to store your audit logs. For SQL Server, as you know, for on-prem servers, you we use the local targets like a file system or a event log or a security log. And for Azure SQL database, we support three types of targets. One is the storage account. You can store your audit logs to a blob storage, and we also support the Azure Monitor, where we have either you can configure the target as log analytics or event hub. So the log analytics gives you a dashboard to understand the security insights against your servers or the databases, and it gives you a nice dashboard and the overall picture what's happening on your server, right? So these are the different types of targets that we support today, and this is applicable for the Azure database as well as the SQL managed instance. So one important thing when it comes to auditing, we need to understand is the audit specifications. So when customers configure this audit for server level and database level, so we have certain set of action groups that are enabled by default for the Azure database. So this is something that we want to insist that for on-prem servers, there is no default audit, right? Customers configure based on their requirement, based on their compliance requirements. They configure a different set of action groups, and they might be having a server level audit and a database level audits. But when it comes to the Azure database, we are providing you a default audit setting, which can be enabled just from the Azure portal. And this default setting has a group of action groups that are enabled by default. So that action groups are basically the batch completed group. This is a group which captures the every transaction that is completed with inside your database. And we also capture the successful database authentication group and a failed database authentication group. So these are the three default action groups that we capture when you enable auditing from the Azure portal. And this default configuration is same for both server level and database level. So one point that I want to insist here is, so that means if you, let us say you configure both server and database level auditing from Azure portal, that means you are basically having two audits running in parallel with the same set of action groups enabled. So one thing that you have to be cautious, that unless you want to have a database audit written to a different target, or you want to have a different retention period, otherwise you don't have to configure both server level and database level audit. So that is something that is important. So how can we configure this auditing for Azure SQL database? The auditing can be configured from the Azure portal, Azure PowerShell, CLI, REST API, or even you can use the ARM templates, the Azure Resource Manager templates. And our documentation has the detailed steps. But again, from the portal, you can only configure the default auditing with the given action groups. And if you have a special requirement to use a custom auditing, like a different set of action groups or a different set of like a predicate filter, which I can show you during the demo. Like, for example, you might want to exclude a specific login from the auditing. You want to exclude a specific database from the auditing. In that case, it cannot be done from the portal. So you have to use one of these client tools that we have, like Azure PowerShell or CLI. Using those commands, you can customize your audits for Azure database based on your requirement. And of course, for box and managed instance, you can just do it from the T-SQL. So you don't have to worry about using the partial commands.
Oh, awesome. This has been really useful so far. I see you have a demo, which I'm excited to see, but it's been great to get like an overview of all the different options. And I love especially how you're comparing it to SQL Server, which is what a lot of people know. But yeah, let's take a look.
Great. So in today's demo, I'm going to quickly show you the default audit which I'm talking about. so that we will understand the picture how the default audit works, and then we will move to the custom audit, how to configure a custom audit, right? So if you see, this is my SQL uh, server database. So if you say this is my SQL Server, which is my Azure SQL Server, the logical SQL Server, and there is an auditing blade here. If you go to the auditing blade, you see here this is the Azure SQL auditing. This is the server level auditing which can be enabled. When you enable Azure SQL auditing for the SQL Server, it's going to be enabled for all the existing databases and the new databases. And like I said, it's going to be the default audit will be covering the three action groups that I mentioned: the batch completed, successful authentication, and failed authentication groups. And the three targets that you can enable are the storage. One is the blob storage account, where you can specify the subscription and storage account. One thing here is, when you're configuring it from the portal, it will allow you to configure the storage account within the same region as your server. But if you want to configure for a different region, you have to do it from the PowerShell command. So that is something that I want you to make a note of. And then you can also configure it to log analytics and provide a log analytics workspace as a target. And you can also configure it to Event Hub. So for our demo, I just configured my audit to log analytics workspace that I have, right? So this is the server level auditing, and you also have something called auditing of Microsoft support operations. So this is the DevOps audit which I was talking about. So these are two different things. So if you want to audit what Microsoft support team is, what kind of operations Microsoft support team is running against your databases when you're reporting any incidents, this is the audit you have to enable. So for that also, again, you can simply enable it from the portal, and you can choose the target as a storage or log analytics or event hub. So this is something that you can enable based on your requirement. So like I said, when you enable the auditing from the portal, it's a default audit which is enabled, and this is a server level audit. So this is enabled by default for all the databases that you have in your server, right? And let me while this saves, let me take you to the database blade here. So for this logical server, I have two Azure databases created. So this is still in it's saving. So these are the two databases I have. So when I go to my database, the SQL database in Azure portal, again in database also you have this auditing blade, where you can check whether you want to enable auditing or not. So when you are coming to the database blade, you can already see that you have the server level auditing is enabled. So now if you are enabling the database level auditing, which is again Azure SQL auditing, when you are turning it on, you should be knowing the reason why you are doing it, because it's going to be again a parallel the same audit is enabled twice at the server level as well as the database level.
Mm.
So unless you want to use a different target or to use a different retention, you may not want to enable this. Okay, so this is the database audit that you can enable from the portal. So now, since this is a default audit and you have the customers have no control on this, what we will do is, I will also show how to configure the custom audits. So a small demo, like we already published a blog which talks about different scenarios where you have to exclude a login, or you have to exclude a specific database, or you want to exclude a specific server principal, or even like a statement, right? You don't want to audit select statements or execute statements, things like that. So for that, you can use this predicate expression, and this block covers a lot of scenarios for yourself. So let me quickly show you what we have configured. Uh, so I'm just setting the context to my subscription, and once that is done, so you have this get commands which can be used to retrieve what is to verify what is enabled today. So for example, I'm just trying to check what is enabled for my SQL Server. So get Azure SQL Server audit tells me the configuration what I have today, right? If you see, these are the action groups which I was talking about, the default action groups, and this is enabled for log analytics target, and this is the log analytics workspace that I have configured. So this is my server level audit. And for database level audit, again, you have this option where you can retrieve the settings using get command. So I can go to my partial and just run this command to review the database level audit settings. And this is my database level settings. And if you see my database, again, this is also enabled with the same set of action groups, and it's enabled for the log analytics workspace. So now that I retrieved my server level and database level properties, uh, another command that I'm going to run will quickly helps you to configure auditing with a different set of action groups. So let us say I just want to add some additional action groups along with the successful and failed action group. So what I'm going to do is you have to use this set SQL Server audit command. So if I just come here and let me yeah, so if you see here, I want to use this database object change group. So whatever commands you execute using the partial, this is going to override your existing configuration. So you have to ensure that you are appending everything that you want because it's going to override, right? So this is going to change my server configuration and add this additional action group, that is the database object change group. Okay, so
Awesome.
this will take like few minutes to
Yeah.
complete. Otherwise, we
That's
are
pretty
good.
cool. While that's loading, I just had one call out. One thing I noticed, which is maybe a hot trick for folks using PowerShell. In the previous command, instead of
Uh-huh.
saying resource group name, server name, and database name, I didn't know that you could just put them in the right order and PowerShell would
Yeah,
figure out the rest. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
it
And the
yes,
rest of this
yes,
is really cool too. But I was like, whoa.
yeah, yes. So it just find it's yeah. So every time you run these commands, you just, if you, let's say now you want to filter something, you can add a predicate expression and say statement like not select. The way you do it in T-SQL, you can do it in the partial as well, just using the predicate expression. So this is just done. So it's the configuration is changed. All right. And just one more thing that I want to show is you also have this view audit logs in Azure portal when you enable the auditing, right? So since my target is log analytics, it gives me a nice dashboard view where it provides you the security insights, right? So this is my security insights. And when I go to the security insights, it tells me what kind of actions are performed against my database or the server for a given period of time. So I think it just, since we have overwritten the settings, I don't think it has the logs. Otherwise, it will tell me what, like how many batch completed events are done against my database or how many RPC completed, things like that.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sravani, for coming on the show. I learned a lot about auditing and got to see a lot of different cool things, even learned a cool PowerShell trick. So just really appreciate you coming on to the Azure SQL Security Series. To our viewers, if you like this episode, go ahead, give it a like, leave us a comment, and let us know which targets for auditing or which tools for auditing that you're using for Azure SQL Database and other services. And we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.